Hi. Hi. Hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson. Today we're listening to Vengence
One
Killers.
of them was his longtime living girlfriend, Yvette Tony, and the other was his research partner, Dr. Anna Gonzalez Angulo. The two women identify him as Dr. George Blumenschein, a member of staff at the University Center. Turns out he's a very prominent cancer researcher at this hospital at MD Anderson.
The doctors immediately admitted him to run a series of tests to figure out what was wrong.
They thought maybe he's having a stroke. They did various neurological tests. The tests are all negative. Meanwhile, Dr. Blumenschein's condition continues to worsen.
The lab work showed an unusual high level of acid in his blood, which was causing kidney damage. He was immediately transferred to intensive care.
He was going into kidney failure. Several of his organs were starting to fail, so he was in great condition.
They're just trying to sort out exactly what's going on and don't really have a clue.
By the time the mystery is solved, it will no longer be just a medical problem, but a matter for police as well. "48-year-old George Blumenschein had been following in his family's footsteps when he first entered the medical profession.
He comes from a family where his father was a renowned doctor himself, who'd known the world over. So he kind of grew up around high-profile doctor community.
He got his BA from Vanderbilt. He got his medical degree from University of Texas Medical School here in Houston, and ended up going into cancer research and studied cancers of the neck and the throat.
After medical school, George decided to stay in Houston to pursue his career.
For the type of research George was doing, he could not have picked a better place. The Texas Medical Center complex is the largest of its kind in the world.
MD Anderson is a premier cancer institution. It is a hospital and teaching center that really is focused on ending cancer. It is a place where people come from all over the world to be treated because they have the cutting edge, and it gives you the best chance at life.
But professional success wasn't the only thing he found there. In 2003, George fell in love with a fellow doctor named Yvette Tony.
Dr. Yvette Tony is an epidemiologist. She's a highly educated person herself, just a different side of the medical field.
They had a lot in common. She was just as brilliant and accomplished as he was. So they hit it off really well. They seemed to grow even closer over the years. 2007 was an important year for them. Yvette landed her dream job with a pharmaceutical company, and they decided to move in together.
Although they were never married, in 2012, George and Yvette made a different life decision.
They wanted to take the next step, and that next step for them was to try to have a child.
Normally, there would be nothing wrong with that, but Yvette did face challenges getting pregnant.
They were both in their late 40s, so it was a little late to have a child. So, they tried to use IVF.
There's, various procedures that Yvette had to go through in their quest to have a child.
Their persistence seemed to pay off. In May of 2012, Yvette learned she was pregnant with twins, but it would end in heartbreak.
Yvette Tony suffered a miscarriage, and when that happened, that was devastating for both Dr. Blumenschein and Yvette Tony.
They were still trying to recover from that loss. It's a very difficult thing for any couple to get over.
Now, just 4 months later, George has been admitted to intensive care, and the couple is dealing with another life-threatening medical emergency.
Dr. George Blumenschein was taken to the emergency center in the late evening. He was in critical condition.
Once your kidneys go, things start shutting down pretty fast. And they realize that he is probably going to die, so they put him on dialysis.
They could not figure out what was wrong with Dr. Blumenschein until it was almost too late.
The next day, there is finally a breakthrough.
A nurse was changing his urine bag when she noticed that there was this white sediment in the urine. So she sent it over to a kidney specialist for testing.
He took it to his lab and put a sample under the microscope, and he realized, he could see crystals. And he was amazed because he knew what that meant.
Coming up, a mysterious illness becomes a criminal investigation.
It just didn't make any sense, because either he drank it himself or it was poison, which is just too far-fetched to believe. Dr. George Blumenshine, a 48-year-old cancer researcher, has been admitted to intensive care after his kidneys mysteriously began shutting down. And after a battery of tests, doctors have isolated the cause.
It wasn't until the nephrologist, the kidney doctor, looked under the microscope and saw these calcium oxalate crystals and thought, oh my goodness, this is what's going on. He has been poisoned. Because there are not really very many things that can cause calcium oxalate crystals in the urine. It's a telltale sign of ethylene glycol poisoning, which is consistent with his other symptoms. Those symptoms include intoxication, stomach pain, and kidney failure. You can die from ingesting even a small amount.
It just didn't make any sense, because this is basically antifreeze. An adult doesn't drink it, much less, a world-renowned doctor.
The hospital immediately notifies police. Investigator Max Sosa is assigned to the case.
I made my way over to intensive care where he was located. He wasn't able to be responsive to any type of questioning. It was just his physical condition.
What normally kills somebody in ethylene glycol poisoning is not just the kidney failure, but it is the metabolic derangements that occur. Death can occur from a life-threatening heart rhythm and arrhythmia.
Because of the circumstances of not knowing what we had, it was real touch and go.
With George out of commission, the next step is to talk to those closest to him.
The detective begins with George's longtime girlfriend, Yvette Tony.
Since it looked like a poisoning case, the authorities wanted to know what he had eaten and what he had drank.
When I initially met Yvette Tony, she was very nice. She appeared to be forthcoming. We tried to get a time frame of when they had eaten together.
Yvette says she has no idea how he could have been poisoned. They'd shared a meal just the night before, when George returned from a medical conference.
They had gotten takeout from a well-known Greek restaurant here in Houston, drank a bottle of wine, went to bed, everything seemed fine.
She showed no symptoms that were anything similar to what George Blumenshine was experiencing. So that led me to believe that I could possibly rule out anything that they had consumed or drank together.
That morning, George had left for work, even though it was a weekend.
He got up, drank a glass of orange juice, and then went out the door to go work with Dr. Gonzalez Angulo.
They had been working together long hours on a project, a research paper.
There was no signs that there was anything wrong with him. There was no slurring of his speech. Nothing was wrong with his gait. He just appeared to be normal.
But Yvette says that when she called George later that day, something didn't seem right.
She said that the first time that she spoke with him, it was somewhere around noon, 1 o'clock, and he was complaining of his head hurting. The second time that she talked to him, she indicated that she could already hear a slur in his speech at that point. She was concerned that he was displaying symptoms of possibly having a stroke.
Some time goes by, she still hasn't heard from him, so she starts to get worried. She tried calling him several times in the next few hours, but he never picked up.
Yvette tells police that George was scheduled to have a dinner meeting that night with several other physicians, including Dr. Ana Gonzalez Angulo. So around 10 p.m., she finally tried contacting Ana at home.
Yvette was able to reach Dr. Gonzalez Angulo on her phone and ask what the heck was going on. And Dr. Gonzalez Angulo said, I think it's fine. George is acting weird, though.
Yvette told me she's asking what condition he's in and why hasn't he gone to the doctor yet. Dr. Gonzalez Angulo's response was that George was uncontrollable. She wasn't able to convince him to go to the doctor.
Yvette tells Dr. Gonzalez Angulo, stay there, I'm coming to get him, and I'll take him to the hospital.
But Yvette says that by the time she arrived at Anna's home, George had already left.
George was driving himself to the hospital. The reaction that Yvette Tony had at that point was she just couldn't understand how Dr. Gonzalez Angulo allowed him to drive his vehicle in the condition that he was in.
Apparently, he just took the keys and left. There wasn't much she could do to stop him. So Anna and Yvette both drive over to MD Anderson, where they find George sitting on a bench.
He basically had driven himself to the parking garage where he normally parked. They were trying to urge him to get to the hospital, and he was reluctant. His speech was slurred. He was incoherent.
To convince George he needed help, Yvette recorded him slurring on her phone while she and Anna talked to him.
He's trying to act normal, like nothing's wrong, and he just looks like a drone. She takes it for, her own edification to show him later, this is why I made you go.
Why don't you stand up and introduce yourself?
8 hours or so, I've been progressively discoordinated. His speech, his reaction, his movements, it all appeared that he wasn't understanding at all what was going on. They actually had to call emergency center personnel to come and get him.
Josh, Josiah, how are you? How are you? I'm fine. I'm fine. Just been sure. That's what happened.
More than 8 hours after his symptoms first appeared, George was finally admitted to the ER. But was it already too late?
What was difficult in not being able to talk to the victim was he was the one who knew who he was in contact with, what he had eaten, what he had drank, without any of that information available to us. It was a delay in leading us to where we needed to go.
Maybe it was a patient that was upset and going after doctors at MD Anderson, somebody that didn't get cured and was going to die anyway. It was just such an unbelievable crime to poison somebody with, such a coarse substance.
Coming up, hospital rumors lead to a surprising new suspect.
It seemed to be the worst kept secret at the hospital.
It has been several hours since Dr. George Blumenshine was diagnosed with severe chemical poisoning, and investigators are trying to determine who could have done it.
The actual chemical that was used was ethylene glycol. That's commonly known to be used in antifreeze. However, it was used in its pure form, and that is commonly used in laboratories.
It seemed very unlikely that
Okay.
an experienced doctor
Clue.
would
That's
accidentally
a clue right there.
And it just so happens that Dr. Blumenshine didn't even work in the lab.
Did that mean the suspect
Access.
working at the hospital?
We looked at the possibility of someone eliminating somebody just so they could take credit for the research.
We looked into every possibility, but every possibility was not a probability.
Meanwhile, George continues to fight for his life.
He was so sick, he was near death.
The investigation has only just begun when it hits an unexpected roadblock. George's girlfriend, Yvette Tony, has been helpful to detectives so far, but now she suddenly seems to have a change of heart.
She indicated that she was going to have to confer with an attorney. It was surprising because that was going to hinder our process in the investigation. Was she being protected or was she trying to hide something?
Yvette Tony was absolutely a suspect. We did not rule out or rule in anyone until we had all the facts.
And when police try to interview George's research partner, Dr. Ana Gonzalez Angulo, they find her equally evasive.
When trying to even make contact, even in a phone call, it was very difficult. It took several days before I was able to arrange a meeting with her.
Could both women have something to hide? Hoping to find answers, detectives turn to George's colleagues, and what they learn is surprising.
The other doctors say that he's a well-respected member of the faculty. They have no idea who will want to harm him, but he does have a secret.
This was a guy who was having an affair, who had kept it from his long-term live-in girlfriend with whom he was trying to have a child, who was engaged in a relationship with Dr. Gonzalez.
At age 41, Dr. Ana Gonzalez Angulo had come a long way from her humble beginnings.
Dr. Gonzalez was born and grew up in Popayan, Colombia. Her parents had 3 children. They grew up on a ranch, producers of coffee and fruit and cattle. So it was a hardworking family.
Like George, she decided to go into medicine because of her family members.
She chose specifically to be an oncologist because several family members were touched by cancer.
After medical school in Colombia and a residency in Florida, Ana landed at MD Anderson in 2003. She quickly rose to be one of the hospital's shining stars.
Dr. Gonzalez Angulo was world-renowned for her cancer research. She had patients that she had saved their lives. They loved her.
It was very evident to me personally that she took care in my well-being. We were going to cure cancer, my cancer. What distinguishes her from being a good physician to a great physician is that you know that you're in good hands.
She and George met shortly after she arrived to the hospital. It seemed like a good partnership.
Dr. Gonzalez Angulo and Dr. Blumenstein both had an incredible passion to search for cures for cancer. That certainly brought them closer together in both their research and in their personal lives.
By 2013, the two colleagues were spending most of their time together, in and out of the lab.
They went on trips together, on speaking engagements or conventions.
They went to remote places, I want to say Vietnam, to Ecuador, and in fact, not long before this all transpired, they were in Colombia on business.
These people were working at least 60 hours a week, sometimes a lot more. It seems like it would have been easy to, blur the lines between, professional boundaries and the more personal boundaries.
Rumor was, that's exactly what happened.
The suggestion was made by several doctors that there was more than just friendship going on.
There was an incident where a colleague walked in and she was sitting on his lap in his office. It emerged that she was really flirty with him a lot of the time.
Dr. Blumenstein would call Dr. Gonzalez Angulo his little princess. They had pet names for each other. He was definitely a two-way street when it came to romantic mingling.
The possibility of an affair might explain Anna's reluctance to talk to police, and it raises even more questions about George's girlfriend.
Did Yvette Tony know that he was cheating on her? Was she angry about that?
Most crimes either happen because of sex or money, and if money wasn't an issue, they were about to start looking for sex.
We had to take into consideration that this could have been a scorned lover because of the apparent love triangle that we had going on.
Coming up, details of the affair threaten to turn the investigation upside down.
He makes this sort of hospital bed confession.
As George Blumenstein continues to fight for his life at MD Anderson Hospital, detectives have just learned that their victim has been living a double life for 2 years. But is George's affair with his research partner the reason why he was poisoned?
What finally emerged was this really twisty tale of the doctor who was cheating on his girlfriend with another doctor. The police went through that and said, maybe it's Yvette Tony. Maybe she has found out about the affair.
The more the investigators spoke to George's colleagues, the more it seemed like the worst kept secret in the hospital.
Yvette has gotten a lawyer and stopped talking to police. But a few days later, detectives finally get a chance to sit down with the other woman in this alleged love triangle, Dr. Ana Gonzalez Angulo.
We had a lengthy interview. I asked her about her schedule, his schedule. I asked her about them eating or drinking anything while they were together, and what his mannerisms were when she was with him for that day. She didn't provide anything that was damaging to her other than the fact that she provided him coffee to drink.
He didn't start displaying any symptoms until the afternoon, and by the evening, he was so intoxicated that his colleagues thought he was having a stroke. When they get around to asking her about the affair, she completely denies it.
She was forthcoming about the amount of time that they spent together. She told me that they were very close friends. I asked if there was more, and she just referred to themselves as very close friends.
Although Anna claims there was no affair, she's well aware of the rumors. She tells investigators that her partnership with George has caused her serious problems.
She described threatening letters, there were threatening phone calls. They all have the common thread of stay away from Dr. Blumenstein, you're too close to him, stay away.
She even indicated that there was a point where she had gone out to check her mail, and she was taken to the ground and punched and kicked. When the assault occurred, she called George Blumenstein, and he and Yvette Tony both offered a place for her to stay. They supposedly urged her to go to the police, and she put it off for a time.
The police report appears to confirm the attack.
I was provided with photos of what appeared to be bruising to her face and her abdomen. She described a man and a woman, both African American.
After he was poisoned, those threats and those letters suddenly became Exhibit A.
This all seems to point at Yvette as a potential suspect. If she thought that there was an affair, she might be trying to get back at him.
Investigators are only left with more questions, but thankfully, they're about to get some of them answered.
They got word from the ICU that George was going to pull through. There was kidney damage, but he's going to survive. He doesn't say much while he's recovering in the hospital, but the detectives were able to talk to him after he was released a few weeks later.
It occurred to me that interviewing him at his home or at his office wasn't the ideal or most comfortable place to speak with him. So I convinced him to take a ride with me in my police vehicle. It's an unmarked vehicle, just something that he would have been comfortable in. So we went for a drive and we had a lengthy conversation. He finally provided me a definite timeline, came clean with his affair that had been going on with Anna Marie and Johnson Gould. The fact that Yvette Tony had no idea that anything was going on between them.
According to George, the affair had been Anna's idea.
Anna Marie Gonzalez was the one that pursued him. She was the one that reached out to him. She was the one that suggested that they work on research together, that they travel to conventions together.
And then things started getting a lot less professional.
At first, George tried to keep their relationship professional. After all, he had a living girlfriend. But after constant temptation, he finally gave in.
In 2011, Dr. Blumenstein and Dr. Gonzalez Angulo began their affair. They were at a conference in Sweden together, and that's when they first started their sexual relationship.
George tells detectives that he regrets his infidelity and has already told Yvette about it.
Dr. Blumenstein was absolutely remorseful for his actions, and he owned them.
He makes this sort of hostile bit confession to his girlfriend and says, I need to tell you that I'm having an affair. And it's with Dr. Gonzalez Angulo.
When investigators asked Yvette about it later, she admitted to having turned a blind eye to it. Even if Yvette knew about the affair, George insists that she would have never tried to poison him. There would have only been one person who would have tried to do that.
Coming up, a jealous lover carries out her deadly plan.
Dr. Blumenschein said that the coffee was incredibly sweet.
Months after the near-fatal poisoning of Dr. George Blumenschein, investigators believe they have a solid suspect. His research partner, Dr. Ana Gonzalez Angulo.
This case had more twists and turns than a Rubik's Cube. To put it all together was not easy, but when you finally got it, it was crystal clear.
So they've been looking at Yvette because they thought that she was jealous of Anna. But George thinks it was the other way around.
George says his suspicions first began when he confided in Anna about the tragedy of Yvette's miscarriage.
Her reaction was, well, I can have a baby for you. That was her first offer when he provided her that information.
She had told him that she could have the child in Colombia and come back and he could be the uncle.
It's amazing to think that she would possibly just try to be a surrogate for them. What a friend.
George declined the offer. Soon after, Anna began telling him that she was getting threats about their relationship.
Ana Maria Gonzalez Angulo informed George Blumenschein that she started receiving letters and phone calls suggesting that she stay away from George.
It was pretty clear to me what she was doing is she's threatening and harassing herself to try to drive a wedge between Dr. Blumenschein and Yvette.
That strategy hadn't worked. But how much further had Anna been willing to go?
George is convinced that Anna's the one that poisoned him because of the way his illness progressed over the course of the day.
George Blumenschein described January 27th as being the day where he woke up in the early morning hours, and the goal on his agenda was to go over to Ana Maria Gonzalez's townhome, pick her up, and they would both go to the office to do research.
George says Anna had something else in mind.
She apparently pulled him into the bedroom where they engaged in sexual activity. Afterwards, they had breakfast, and Anna gave him a cup of coffee that tasted unusually sweet.
Being a person that he spent hours with, she knew exactly how he took his coffee. He drank his coffee black, unsweet.
He takes a few sips and says, I can't drink it, it's too sweet. And she keeps forcing it on him. Drink this coffee, it's from my homeland, it's from my homeland.
She told him how special that coffee was. He could never have imagined how special it was indeed.
Ethylene glycol, by nature, is very, very sweet. It is an age-old poison that individuals have used to harm others.
This strange tale of the special coffee that's extremely sweet is surely, to us, it was clear that was the moment that he was poisoned.
Based on George's testimony, it didn't really seem like there was any other explanation.
I went back and I asked him about the wine that he had drank with Yvette telling me just to rule it out. I asked him if there was any distinct sweetness to the wine, and he said no, that there wasn't. So the only thing at that point that he had consumed from the previous night to that morning was the coffee, and that was the only thing that he consumed that would have had the sweetness that ethylene glycol would have produced.
Detectives theorize that when it finally became clear George would never leave his girlfriend, Anna snapped.
Dr. Gonzalez Angulo knew she was losing Dr. Blumenschein. There's no doubt in her mind the affair meant way more to her than it did to him.
She wanted to have a child with him, she wanted to be with him. He was living with no woman, and I think it sort of stringing her along.
Dr. Gonzalez Angulo wanted to kill Dr. Blumenschein because if she couldn't have him, she didn't want anyone to have him.
Now, they just have to find a way to prove it.
We were waiting for a detailed report from the chemist. We had to establish timelines of how what he ingested would have metabolized and what the time frame would have been. We got with the experts, and when we looked at the timeline, there was only one thing that was off. It was that coffee, and the timeline fit like a glove. The amount of time that ethylene glycol takes to metabolize in the body, that would have ruled out Yvette Tony because of the time frame where he started exhibiting the symptoms.
He would have been well into metabolic acidosis and renal failure by the time that he had presented to the hospital. So the timeline does not fit at all that Yvette was the poisoner, not to mention the fact that she would have not had access to ethylene glycol from a laboratory.
On May 29th, 2013, 4 months after George was poisoned, Anna is arrested on her way to work.
I told her that she was under arrest for the aggravated assault by means of poisoning of Dr. George Blumenshine. She said that I had it all wrong, and my response to her at that point was, "You can't beat science." And she dropped her head, and I believe she responded, "No, you can't."
Coming up, the jury hears new evidence captured by the victim himself.
Some of those recordings were chilling.
On September 15th, 2014, the trial of 43-year-old Dr. Ana Gonzalez Angulo gets underway. She stands accused of poisoning her lover, Dr. George Blumenshine.
This wasn't just a woman scorned, this was a woman scorched. She was looking for vengeance.
If convicted, Anna could face up to life in prison.
George's credibility definitely came to the question during trial. You know, here's a man who wants to play the victim.
Are you proud of what you did with the defendant?
No, I regret it deeply.
Whether the jury liked him or did not like him wasn't the issue. The issue was you had a man, a doctor, whose maybe only fault was not being faithful to his longtime girlfriend.
Despite her conflicting emotions, Yvette provides the prosecution with compelling testimony.
I trusted her. I trusted him. I felt stupid. I felt betrayed.
Yvette Tony provided the antidote to the jury for their hatred of Dr. Blumenshine. She would never harm this man. You could look at her and see. And she told the jury she felt like a fool for not realizing that this was going on. Yvette Tony was credible and crucial.
I kept thinking to myself, you're gonna make me look like a complete idiot. No one said anything to me about this.
She stated that after George confessed about the affair, he also shared his suspicions about Anna.
George said that did not poke the dragon. I think she poisoned me, and I don't want to say anything until I know for certain or we have some sort of proof.
They think, well, you know, we're going to just sort of PI this stuff ourselves, be our own personal private investigators. So they start calling and getting her on the line to try to admit that she's done something wrong.
It turned out George recorded those phone calls, and they're now played for the jury in court.
Why in Christ will I ever hurt you? Why?
Why would that hurt me?
I don't know. I don't know you two. I don't know what's behind you two.
On the tapes, Anna tried to shift the blame to Yvette, just as she had done with the police.
If I tell you that I have enough circumstantial evidence to press charges, will you believe me?
No.
I do.
Against Yvette?
Yes.
Dr. Gonzalez Angulo could never provide the evidence and the supporting documentation to the claims that she made.
According to the state, Anna had fabricated everything, including the claim that she was beaten.
When we started looking, and we looked at all the details and everything, it didn't match up.
The colors of the bruising didn't match. It didn't fit. That the strikes to the face occurred at the same time the strikes to the abdomen did.
She beat herself up. That is what she did. It's sad, but it's true.
Prosecutors argue that the toxicology report proved that Anna was the only one that could have poisoned George.
We had a mountain of evidence against Dr. Gonzalez Angulo, and we had the best kind of evidence. We had science.
The science proved that he was poisoned with ethylene glycol, and it was done at a time when this coffee was administered to him.
The defense doesn't agree. They argue that the science is anything but conclusive.
There was evidence presented during trial that the ingestion of any harming substance could have occurred even the day before or the days before when Dr. Blumenshine was with the vet Tony.
The defense, however, challenged the idea that Anna was as obsessed with George as he made her out to be. The affair wasn't as serious as he thought.
You can see this sort of web that the prosecution spun of there being some fake. Dr. Gonzalez, really casually.
My understanding of the relationship was it was a mutually satisfactory sexual relationship. So I don't believe she was ever looking for something deeper.
The defense also draws attention to many holes in the case against Anna, including a lack of due diligence in the investigation.
There were so many issues, whether it was the scientific evidence, whether it was the lack of investigation into the various suspects, whether it was the veracity of the witnesses that the state brought, whether it was sort of the overreaching nature of the prosecution's, very dramatic case.
But what would the jury believe? After deliberating for 2 days, they finally reach a decision.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Ana Maria Gonzalez Angulo, guilty of aggravated assault of a person with whom the defendant had a dating relationship.
We asked for a lot of prison time because she had basically stolen years from Dr. Blumenshine.
Dr. Blumenshine has permanent lasting kidney damage. His kidneys don't work at full capacity. He has to watch what he eats and how much he drinks, and his life expectancy is probably shorter based on having the damaged kidneys. She was sentenced to 10 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice.
In her jealousy, Anna had not only hurt the man she loved, but ended a promising career as well.
She cried, not just for herself and her life, but maybe even more so for her parents, for her family. Had she known this would lead to this, I don't think she would have been with him.
Everyone loses. Dr. Blumenshine has lost a piece of life that he can't get back, and his life is forever altered. And women all over the world have lost someone who had the ability to cure and help breast cancer.
Young employees at a luxury hotel.
Both were excellent members of staff. They were known as punctual, good, solid, hard-working people.
Until they were both slain under mysterious circumstances.
They were met with a horrific scene, possibly some form of bizarre, ritualistic behaviour.
That indicated a lot of anger, a lot of passion. This wasn't just some random attack.
The search for their killer lead investigators down a dark and disturbing path.
He just had this sort of anger festering inside him that was just ready to erupt and let roll.
But the more clues they uncover, the more bizarre the case becomes.
This must have just been so baffling for the investigators.
I've never seen anything like it in 14 years of dealing with murder.
August 10th, 2011, London, England. Around 3:15 p.m., managers at the Radisson Blue Edwardian Hotel outside Heathrow Airport call police after 3 of their employees go missing.
They were due to start shift at 3 p.m. and they didn't show up. And that was very out of character for them. So the time went by and he began to get more and more worried.
The hotel staff had obviously tried to reach them by phone. Tried to no avail.
When officers get there, they're told that two of the employees live in staff apartments behind the hotel. So that's where they start.
The officers enter, not knowing what they're about to discover.
They found what was essentially a bloodbath.
On the floor is the dead body of a young woman.
She'd been subjected to a horrendous stabbing attack.
They also noticed a trail of blood leading to the back bedroom. Now, when they go in there, they find another victim. The body of a young man, naked, laid out on the bed. It appears he's also been stabbed.
The victims are identified as two of the three missing employees, 20-year-old receptionists, Tibor Voss and Alice Adams.
It's not just horrifying, it's unimaginable. I mean, this just isn't the sort of place where something like this happens.
Tibor Voss was born and raised in Budapest, Hungary, and although he came from humble beginnings, he had big dreams.
He came from a fairly poor background, but he was quite bright. I mean, he was a prodigious musician. He could play pretty much every instrument he turned his hand to.
His favourite instrument seems to have been the piano, which had been a gift from his grandmother.
It was 100 years old, and apparently this was something he played regularly and often and was very good at.
But in 2006, at the age of 15, Tibor's life changed forever when his father suddenly died.
Tibor certainly took on the role of the father figure, but due to his young age, his mother did struggle to make ends meet and pay for the family to live in Hungary.
Tibor was doing everything he could to improve his family's fortunes. He'd applied to the University of Budapest in 2008, but unfortunately he'd been turned down.
He was planning to apply to university the next year to have a second go.
In the meantime, Tibor decided to move to London to find work.
I think London offered him a fresh start in a big city somewhere in Europe. He could come to the UK, he could earn a bit more money than he could earn at home.
And in August of 2010, 19-year-old Tibor got his big break.
He had managed to get a job at the Radisson Edwardian Hotel, which is a stone's throw from Heathrow Airport.
It was where, travellers would stay or business people would stop in before going to the airport.
It seemed Tibor really loved his job, and he quickly made friends with all of the staff. It seemed like everybody loved him.
By all accounts, he sort of threw himself into his work. He was very good at it. He was well respected as a colleague.
One of the friends Tibor made was 20-year-old Alice Adams.
Alice was a local girl who lived with her family in Buckinghamshire. It seemed that she and Tibor bonded over their love for music.
She had an arts background and played musical instruments, played the guitar, and was a very entertaining personality.
Alice was working at the hotel to save up to take a trip of a lifetime.
Alice's aunt was due to get married later that month in Hawaii.
Her sisters were going, her mum was going. It was all booked and ready to go. They were feeling excited. Everybody had been rather infected by her enthusiasm since she'd arrived. She was gregarious and funny and certainly well liked among the staff at the hotel, and guests seemed to take to her as well.
Tibor and Alice quickly became integral members of the hotel staff. But as much as he enjoyed London, Tibor was determined to return to Budapest and help his family.
He reapplied to the University of Budapest that next year, and this time he got in.
He was going home to sort of pursue that academic dream.
Tibor was scheduled to leave on August 30th, 2011, but the long-anticipated family reunion would never happen. Instead, just 3 weeks before he was supposed to leave, Tibor and Alice have both been found murdered, and police have no idea why.
They were young, they were vibrant, and The scene was as baffling as it was gruesome.
There was a murderer who was prepared to kill two people at one time at large. Coming up, the crime scene reveals some disturbing clues.
He was an excruciatingly violent death with those victims inside. Possibly some form of bizarre, ritualistic behaviour.
London police are investigating the brutal murders of two hotel employees, 20-year-old Tibor Voss and his friend Alice Adams.
3 of the workers down for the 3 p.m. shift did not turn up. So eventually the police were called and kicked in the door.
They've been found stabbed to death in Tibor's apartment behind the hotel when they failed to show up for work. They're not only looking at 2 extremely violent murders, but a missing person as well.
The first thing the police do is to seal the premises off, effectively, to restrict anybody else having access.
When homicide detectives arrive, they bring a full forensic team with them to go over the crime scene, looking for evidence.
You're trying to get a picture of what you're dealing with. You know, who are they? What are they doing there?
There are no signs of the third missing employee. There's also no sign of forced entry, and it doesn't look like anything was stolen. In fact, it appears there had been a wild party going on the night before.
There was evidence of alcohol consumption, and there was some drug paraphernalia around the flat.
Police found the remnants of poppers, which are essentially a sort of mood loosening drug that you sniff. It tends to sort of diminish inhibitions.
Investigators don't yet know if the drugs have anything to do with the murders, but it seems possible, given the extreme violence involved.
There were 22 stab wounds to both to the front and the back.
That indicated a lot of anger, a lot of passion, and that tells detectives this wasn't just some random attack. Whoever did this likely knew Alice, and the position they found her body in strengthened that assumption.
She was covered with blood, and her face was covered with a cushion.
It could be that whoever killed her didn't want to see what he'd done, or perhaps if her eyes were open, he felt unnerved by that. It's very difficult to know.
When investigators begin examining Tibor's body, the crime scene becomes even more disturbing.
Tibor was on his back on the bed with his knees, legs slightly raised, hands by his side. It was like he'd been placed like a mannequin in a shop or something.
The pathologist determined that Tibor had been stabbed twice in the heart, but he wasn't on the bed when it happened.
He was naked. He'd sustained fatal stab wounds. You would expect to see a lot of blood on and around the body, but in this particular case, Tibor's body was very clean.
They realised that, in fact, to some extent, his body had been washed. They were able to see that there was diluted blood on his body.
Based on the evidence, detectives believe Tibor was stabbed on the sofa, then moved afterwards.
There was a small mark at the small of his back, which was clearly being dragged on an abrasive surface. The body had been moved and put into position, but they had no idea why.
In my experience, it's very, very unusual. I can only suggest that it's possibly some form of bizarre, ritualistic behaviour by the killer.
Further examination reveals several other strange details.
Both victims had been attacked with a knife, but there weren't any defensive wounds. Alice had a cut on her arm, but you'd expect there to be more evidence if someone was trying to stop someone stabbing them to death.
But I mean, that was one of the strangest things. So it was either they'd been caught unaware, or perhaps they'd been sort of stupefied by the drugs and the alcohol that they'd taken.
That, combined with the fact that detectives couldn't find any trace of the killer in the apartment, meant this wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment attack. Somebody planned this.
There was all this blood inside the threshold, everywhere, but there was no blood outside at all, which one would expect to find if someone heavily bloodstained had left the scene.
As deliberate as the killer seemed to have been, they hadn't even tried to get rid of the murder weapon.
On initial examination of the crime scene, several blood-stained knives were found within the flat.
On the one hand, you've got the injuries to Alice, which suggest a crime of passion, but on the other hand, you've got what happened to Tibor, which were almost sort of cold and calculating in nature.
This was quite clearly not a normal murder case. Even experienced detectives were looking at this scene and wondering what on earth was going on.
The hotel's security footage doesn't provide any leads either. So detectives turned to Tibor and Alice's co-workers, hoping they might be able to shed some light on what happened.
They got glowing reports on both Alice and Tibor. Both were excellent members of staff. They were known as punctual, good, solid, hard-working people.
Police learned that Alice had only been working there for a few weeks. She and Tibor were really close, but it wasn't a romantic thing. They just had lots in common.
Employees say the party at Tibor's apartment was to celebrate him finally getting into college.
We were told that the party was because Tibor Bass was due to go back to Hungary, so a celebration of sorts, or a going-away party.
He was leaving London and returning home, something that he was very happy about.
The colleagues had been with, in fact, Tibor and Alice, they were drinking. Alice played the guitar, they were singing, and they'd obviously had a good evening.
When it was time to go home, the only people left in Tibor's apartment with him were Alice and his roommate, 31-year-old Attila Ban.
That's the first they've heard of a roommate, but Attila isn't just living with Tibor, he's also a manager at the hotel. And he's the third missing employee.
They didn't know whether he was a victim, kidnapped himself, or was a party to what had taken place.
Coming up, the search for Tibor's roommate turns up a possible motive.
Some speculated that it might be some sort of revenge killing.
A bizarre crime scene at a 5-star hotel in London has left detectives guessing. 2 employees have been murdered, and a third has gone missing. But is he another potential victim or a suspect?
We have learned from witnesses and colleagues that Attila Ban was nowhere to be found. Urgent inquiries were then undertaken to trace him.
They tried calling his cell phone. Now, there's no answer, but it does let detectives see where the phone is currently located.
They could see it was pinging off a cell tower in the area near the hotel. They just couldn't work out where he was. There was no sign of him. He was there, but he wasn't there. It was very odd.
In the meantime, investigators continue to interview other staff members at the hotel.
That was Opera telling Eddie, come play with me.
Relationship with Tibor and Alice.
Attila Ban was from Hungary, like Tibor. But according to those who knew him, Attila's upbringing was very different.
He had an abusive childhood and then was brought up by his grandparents.
No
Things
barking.
didn't get any easier for Attila as he got older.
He was homosexual. He realised that when he was aged about 17 and found that very difficult in Hungary.
He struggled to cope with the fact that he was gay, as in a country where that's not necessarily approved of.
Attila faced an uphill battle living in Hungary, so he decided to make a change.
He was clearly bright. He travelled to the United States and worked there for a while when he was aged about 25, and found life rather more tolerant there about his sexuality.
It seems Attila did fairly well in the States. He got some valuable work experience. But after a while, he decided to move again.
He came to London to better himself and try and get a career in the hotel business.
He had a history of working in the hospitality industry. He'd held similar jobs in the US.
He'd come over to the UK, first of all to visit, but then had managed to get a job working at the Radisson Hotel.
Attila excelled at the Radisson, quickly becoming one of their most valued staff members.
He was a very successful employee. He was gregarious, outgoing, confident.
Customers were very, very quick to praise him. In fact, we never heard anything negative about Attila Ban at all.
As a reward, the hotel gave him one of their exclusive staff apartments to live in.
There were only a few of these, so it was deemed quite a step up to be offered one of these apartments.
That same year, Tibor Voss came to work as a receptionist. It didn't take long for the two to become friends.
I think Attila had recognised a fellow Hungarian who he could bond with.
Tibor was 20, Attila was 31. So Tibor probably thought of him as an older brother, someone he could look up to.
Attila Ban took Tibor under his wing and nurtured him at work and was clearly very impressed with Tibor and saw him as a kindred spirit.
Attila provided Tibor with valuable guidance, as well as a place to live.
Tibor was living in sort of dingy, rented accommodation, and when he sort of expressed the fact that he didn't like this, Attila had asked him to move in. There'd been no secret about Attila's sexuality, and no suggestion that Tibor was homosexual either, and he was perfectly happy to share the flat with him. He was an older man, they came from the same country.
When Alice started working at the hotel, Attila was the one who showed her the ropes as well, and he was the one who introduced her to Tibor, and they all became good friends.
Now Attila has gone missing, and since witnesses place him at the crime scene, he seems to be the most logical suspect. Or he would be if investigators could come up with a motive.
He got on well with both these people, both were charming, pleasant, young colleagues, and there was no apparent reason why they should have been killed.
Detectives still didn't know what to make of the strange, ritualistic way in which Tibor had been killed, so they decided to focus on Alice first.
Police would have thought that Alice was the target. I mean, it seemed that the rage had been directed against her.
When detectives take a look at Alice's cell phone records, they make an interesting discovery.
Analysis of Alice's mobile phone revealed a series of texts that had taken place on the night she died during the small hours of the morning.
She had been in contact with a former boyfriend of hers, Tab.
From what investigators were able to find out, the two had been together for a while, but only recently broken up.
He'd moved away to a different part of the UK to university, and so they were on and off again. It's just been rekindled again at around about this time.
The records also showed that he and Alice had been in contact on the night of the murders.
They were apparently texting while she was at the party, and one of those messages really...
Eddie?
The manager, Attila, and she'd also texted that Tibor was throwing up and drunk.
Investigators don't know much about their relationship at this point, but most boyfriends aren't going to be too happy with their girlfriends texting that they're in bed with another guy.
Did Alice's boyfriend show up at the apartment to take revenge?
With the phone conversations, he could have been jealous.
So maybe he drives over there, kills Alice and Tibor, and kidnaps Attila. For all they know, he could already be dead.
Coming up, a social media post takes the case in a new direction.
It was very mysterious. He just said simply, "I'd like to wake up from this nightmare."
Hours after Tibor Voss and Alice Adams were found stabbed to death in his apartment, London police have a suspect. Alice's former boyfriend, Tad Finney.
The boyfriend is obviously the suspect you would look at first of all. she'd been on the phone to him a few times throughout the evening. I think once even to say that she was in bed with her manager Attila.
However, lab tests from the evidence found in the apartment seem to indicate there was more going on than just a simple tryst.
Tibor and Attila's DNA was present on Alice, and also Attila Band's DNA was present on Tibor. Obviously, at this party, some sexual activity had clearly taken place.
There's no real evidence to suggest that they partied together in this way before.
Did seeing his girlfriend involved in a threesome cause Tad to fly into a jealous rage? Investigators track him down to find out.
He didn't come across as a cold-blooded killer. He was very distraught and said he'd been at home the whole night after talking to Alice.
He was able to provide an alibi of sorts. The last text between them was around 3:30 in the morning, so what that showed to us was that Tad Finney's phone had been at his address.
Of course, that by itself doesn't necessarily prove that he's telling the truth, or that he had his phone with him. So they decided to follow up with a search warrant.
We checked his clothing for any signs of blood distribution or any suggestion that he could have been at the crime scene when the killings took place.
It became clear that he was nowhere near the scene and had been responsible for the murder.
But if he didn't do it, who did?
As investigators are following up on this lead, they come across new information from one of the victim's co-workers.
A colleague from the hotel made police aware of a Facebook post from Attila Band.
At about 7:30 that morning, there'd been a posting saying, "I'd like to wake up from this nightmare."
This appeared to be an odd sentence to use. It was apparently entirely out of
man.
character. This post, with its potentially sinister connotation, didn't make sense.
The cryptic message does tell investigators one thing, however.
It confirmed to us that Attila Band was clearly alive, but what we didn't know was where he was.
And if Attila's not a victim, there's only one other alternative.
It became clear that Attila Band was a suspect, and they needed to find him as soon as they could to find out what had happened.
Detectives returned to the hotel to speak with Attila's friends. And this time, they discover there's more to this employee of the year than meets the eye.
People seemed to be a little hesitant to talk about it at first, but it seemed the rumour was that Attila liked Tibor a little bit too much, that he had a major crush on him.
I'm trying to quit this.
Attila was well aware that Tibor wasn't gay, but he might have been hoping to change his mind.
Attila managed to arrange his rosters so that they would work together and they would finish work together, and he arranged them to share the same flat.
As they spent more time together, the relationship grew.
Okay, Eddie, that's enough. Come on.
Attila Band was what I would describe as infatuated or almost obsessed with Tibor.
The problem was that it just wasn't reciprocated. Tibor was not interested. He was interested in women.
In the months leading up to the murders, Tibor and Attila's friendship started to suffer.
Amplifier.
Tibor didn't appreciate all that he was doing for him.
No barking.
In supporting him at work.
Sit.
Really taking him under his wing.
Sit. I said no barking.
Was sliced in by leaving him out of a conversation or a social situation.
Colleagues say that on one occasion, he saw the two men get into a heated argument.
Where are you going?
Tibor had arranged for a staff photograph to be taken. And on the day it was taken, Attila was not in the photograph.
Not my face.
He was left out of this photo, and Attila was not happy about that at all.
Yeah.
And things only seemed to get worse once Tibor started becoming closer with Alice.
Attila was upset about that. Clearly jealous of anybody else having a relationship.
If someone could tell me, why does he get more up in my face?
To be spending time with him, he got in the flat.
You can in the comments below.
Who just wants to know
I don't know why.
a few weeks.
Had it been enough to finally cause Attila to snap?
He just had this sort of anger festering inside him that was just ready to sort of erupt at any moment.
And the whole thing was compounded by Tibor's intention to leave the UK. This is what we believe is motivation for the killings.
With Alice's boyfriend cleared of suspicion, Attila Ban has become the prime suspect. There's just one problem.
We were still left with the indisputable fact. We just didn't know where he was.
Not only do they not know where he is, they have
Okay,
no
that's
idea
enough.
how he managed to flee the scene without anybody seeing him.
There are a number of theories that police worked up. That maybe he was in the loft, maybe he jumped out of the window, or maybe he'd been particularly cold and calculated.
Okay, but not my face.
A clean pair of shoes outside the front door, so he could have put that
So
on
your
the
breath
made his getaway
taken
without
care
leaving a
of.
telltale trail of blood.
We checked to see if there was any loft space or a crawl space or adjoining property that
Go
may
that
be
way.
linked.
Or are you getting off? Come on, go on. Keep going. Keep going.
The trail is going cold, but the forensics team went back to that room to check it out again.
Coming up, investigators make a shocking discovery.
This is just a scene that nobody could ever have imagined or envisaged.
It must have been one way. It has been 2 days since the investigation into the murders of Tibor Voss and Alice Adams began. Detectives have narrowed the list of suspects down to one: Tibor's jealous roommate, Attila Ban. But he is nowhere to be found.
It was as if he vanished into thin air.
Hoping to find new leads, London police return to the crime scene. But as soon as they arrive, detectives immediately notice something is wrong.
So the police went back for another look to see what they might have missed at the scene. They saw that the door to the bedroom in the flat that had been left open, it was now closed. It was very apparent that things had been moved around. Like a bottle being moved, medication being moved. It could have absolutely meant that someone had broken into a crime scene. That was probably their biggest fear.
Their first thought is that maybe somebody had broken in to tamper with the evidence. But when they get to the back bedroom, they find the last thing anybody could have expected.
My colleagues then went to push the door, and there was a heavy weight behind it. The bed had been pushed against the door.
So they forced their way into the bedroom, and just out of the blue there is Attila.
Investigators find their murder suspect lying face down on the bed.
He appeared to be in a semi-comatose or drunken and confused state.
There are cuts to his wrist and on his throat, apparently in an attempt to commit suicide.
He was found with a number of superficial injuries. These were only minor grazes.
He's caked in blood, with a craft knife sticking out of his arm and another one in his buttocks.
Once the officers realised that the man in the crime scene was indeed a prime suspect, Attila Ban, he was arrested straight away. But due to his injuries, he was taken straight to hospital.
But with the crime scene sealed off for the past 2 days.
No barking.
Weird.
It's almost over. Yeah, it's almost over.
Cool. Do you want to come with me?
Where?
I'm going to go see Ronnie. I'm going to get my volunteer paperwork notarized.
Okay.
Until one of them notices a small detail in the bedroom.
Come on, walk around a little bit. We can do it, or we just go back home.
Okay. Yeah. And I've been trying to
get out of the car. You just have to come with me.
At least, right.
But Ronnie's just going to come outside. We don't even have to go into the building. Ronnie's just going to come outside, notarize that shit.
Okay. It's almost done. He's a big baby. He is a big baby.
Investigators have been in the premises. He'd been hiding under the bed.
Police are dumbfounded. The entire time they were conducting an investigation.
Watch it.
Right under their noses.
You okay?
He cut out a section of the divan, like his eye holes, if you like, in order to figure out his in my 14 years of dealing with murder investigations, I've never seen anything of the like. It's crazy.
But you've actually taken this primitive survival kit inside. This is a bottle of water, a knife, his mobile phone.
I was looking, I should have recorded all that too.
But it seemed 2 days were as long as Attila could make it. After he's treated and released from the hospital, investigators sit down with Attila to find out what happened.
Everybody, I got a lot of likes on last one. Everybody likes the way you play with Papa.
Surprised to find that he said absolutely nothing, almost as if he'd been struck mute.
Detectives aren't sure whether this is just another deception or an indication of his mental state.
He just murdered his two closest friends, so it's possible he might have had some kind of psychotic breakdown. But at that point, there is no question that
he turns over for you. He's so clumsy. That was cute. He was just hopping around. He was just so happy. That was good. Oh, that's so cute. You gotta see him. He's laying down like you.
It was fair in my view that Attila was suffering from a severe
Wow, that sounded like a roar.
Attila Band faces trial for the murders of Tibor Voss and Alice Adams.
That sounded like a roar like a lion.
But will the jury believe him?
Attila Band was an extremely devious and manipulative individual.
See, he needs to play like that all the time. He does, yes.
I used to play with him like this all the time downstairs.
Oh, yeah?
He could go for hours.
Wow. Yeah, he's a big baby. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Oh.
But prosecutors think otherwise.
Okay.
They paint Attila as a man who was obsessed with his roommate. He became enraged, but his affections were not returned.
Tibor and Alice being such close friends, Tibor intending to leave the UK, coupled with Attila's almost obsessional pursuit of Tibor, all added to Attila's frustration.
Anger and jealousy of the
You went all the way down.
I don't know. Kick your traction.
Attila's desire for Tibor was finally realized in a drug-fueled sexual encounter. But it hadn't turned out the way he hoped.
You're a husky. You're a husky. He's a husky with a fucking German Shepherd mask on, is what he is. He has a fucking German Shepherd mask, but he's a husky deep down. He needs all the attention, all the play, all the, anything to stimulate his mind. He just needs it. He just fucking needs it. He's like, yeah, anything. Give me a fucking challenge. This guy is a husky. I love him.
Since neither of the victims had defensive wounds, prosecutors think that he might have waited until they passed out and then
He did. He drugged them and killed them all.
In this case, was quite what had happened, and it's very difficult to work out.
Prosecutors don't know why Attila took the time to clean and pose Tibor's body afterward, but it showed that he was clearly aware of
what time are we leaving?
I can't really give an opinion on why such an event may have taken place. That's what it might mean for what might happen.
Okay.
As twisted as it might sound, it might have been Hitler's way of paying last respects to the man he loved.
Okay.
Till's defense argues that his actions
I could stay in the car and film the parking lot.
You probably won't even have time to do that.
Oh, okay.
It's going to be that quick.
Oh, okay.
Stand to testify in his own defense, but that proved to be a mistake.
In viewing the evidence, Silaban rather kept to script, accepted he must have killed Vengence Killers.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of hair. Because I did that floor yesterday evening. Yeah.
They ain't no getting around that. He's just a dog.
Yeah, that's why it doesn't bother me. I think
it doesn't
when
bother
I
me
was
either.
younger,
It makes me feel bad when people come in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, oh, that's the little dog hair video? My bad, bro.
Man, really. I just got the sofa, even though, and I just washed that. It's mainly Eddie's hairs on that.
Eddie, yeah, no, I'm cute. I was like, yeah, no, I'm fun. At least I'm fun.
Yeah. He said, so what are we going to do now? So what are we going to do now? And that's what he said.
And the fact that he's suffering from a mental illness, unfortunately, basically just proves when they consider that he had the presence of
Alright, so you're ready to go?
Okay, yeah, I just got to put shoes on, that's all. Okay. Okay.
In effect,
Even if he lost control, provoked by sending his hand, that would be possible.
The jury agrees. On July 18, 2012, they find Attila guilty on all counts.
The jury convicted Silaban of the 2 counts of murders he faced, and 1 count for Alice and 1 count for Teal.
I believe the jury thought, as I do, that Attila was an extremely devious and manipulative individual.
He was sentenced to a life in prison and served a minimum of 26 years. It must have provided some comfort to see him pay for what he did, but nothing can undo the pain he caused.
A disturbed man's jealousy had ended 2 promising young lives and shattered the lives of their families forever.
I never